So, on the topic of rhythm. Rhythm by some musicians is seen as something really difficult, and it's something that's kind of elusive. And as someone who has struggled a lot with rhythm throughout my musical life, I can definitely relate to that. And a lot of music theory textbooks say nothing about this. And I think partially that's because of the nature of rhythm in itself. Rhythm is pretty elusive in that you can write down a rhythm and ask someone to perform that rhythm, and that person can completely destroy whatever rhythm that you just created and do something completely different. And so today I wanted to dive into that a little bit and give some exercises that have helped me with rhythm and hopefully clarify some things about the rhythm and ways to practice this that will help your time feel in general. So first, let's start by defining rhythm. So rhythm is simply placing notes or musical items within a certain span of time. Now there's basically three categories for rhythm. There is grid-based rhythm, non-grid based rhythm, and shifting grid based rhythm. Now what I mean by that is, well, the grid-based rhythm is something metronomic, like you have a BPM, there's a steady pulse, then you're following it. Something without a grid is something completely free in time and there's no grid whatsoever. Then with the shifting grid, it's something like rubato, where there is some sort of grid, but it's just going fast and slow very rapidly and changing at whim. Now usually when someone says, oh, you're not playing in time, or this rhythm's not in time, or your time feel sucks, usually doesn't necessarily mean that you're not playing with rhythm, because anytime a musical note is placed with somewhat intention, I think that constitutes a rhythm. However, what they do mean is that you're not playing with the grid, you're playing without a grid or with a shifting grid. And that's not inherently a good or bad thing musically speaking, but the real question is, did you intend on playing it that way? Did you intend to not be on the grid, and was this something that you intended to do? Now, if you don't know the answers to that, an easy way is to just record yourself and listen back and hear what you think. If you're hearing things that you didn't intend, that's a clear indicator that you didn't really mean to place things out of time. And so part of it is just generating more rhythmic awareness. I took a class with the great percussionist and drummer John Hadfield, and one day he said something that really resonated with me. He said, whenever you're playing something and you rush or drag, it's sort of like when you're walking along a river on top of stones, but you're not looking down and you fall into the river because you couldn't see the stone that was in front of you. It's sort of like that. If you have a clear rhythmic grid, then you'll know where to place the notes within the time. So that leads me into eighth notes. Now the reason why I like to start with eighth notes is that it's the most common form of rhythm in the Western world. Most guitar strumming patterns are simply different groupings of eighth notes. Sometimes you'll see some triplets, sometimes you'll see some 16th notes, but it's predominantly eighth notes. Ari Honig even argues that 16th notes are really just fast 8th notes, so if you can play 8th notes, you can also play 16th notes. Which is true because 16th notes are just double the value of 8th notes. 8th notes at 160 BPM are the same thing as 16th notes in 80 BPM. So you may have learned 8th notes as 1 and 2 and 3 and, but really all they are placing 2 notes within one beat of the grid. If we're in 4/4 time, this is quarter notes, but to put it simply, it's just spacing 2 evenly spaced notes within 1. If you're a math head, it's exactly just a 2-to-1 ratio. So we have something like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now before I grab my guitar and before you grab your instrument, I think it's very important to be able to internalize these rhythms within your body. I studied with Wayne Krantz for one semester at NYU, and one thing that he said that really resonated with me is that the guitar doesn't generate rhythm, guitar is just a medium. Guitar is just what your musical voice flows through, but the guitar is not going to give you rhythm. The rhythm has to be within you, and you have to tell the guitar what rhythms to play. So let's start off with just our body. So what I want to do is I want to clap 8th notes and tap quarter notes with my foot. I'm going to set up a little foot camera down there. Don't get any ideas, internet. So now I'm just going to simply clap 8th notes and then I'm going to tap with my foot quarter notes. I recommend that you practice this along with me. Let's try it. We can also count as well. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now when you're practicing this, the trick is to go really slowly so that way you really internalize the movements. It's actually kind of deceivingly hard, and if you find yourself like stumbling over this, don't worry, like you're still a good musician and all that. But it's just like a physical thing that we have to get used to. But then once you have this sort of foundation, it'll be a lot easier to, for example, tap your foot while you're playing, or it'll be easier to subdivide, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. So now that we have this 2-to-1 ratio down, there's really 3 combinations because we can either place an 8th note on the 1, on the and, or the 1 and the and. So the first combination is just on the 1, so we have just this. We have that movement. So that I would call together because we're clapping and stomping together. Then we have the other motion of separate. So that would look something like this, which is 1 and. So we're hitting the offbeat and you're basically stomping and then clapping, but you're never stomping and clapping at the same time. Then we have together and separate, which is a combination of the two. 1 and 2 and 3 and. That's exactly what we just did. And there's actually a 4th one, which is actually not playing any of the 8th notes. So it's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I don't necessarily think you need to practice that, but if you want to, you go ahead. So that's all the combinations of eighth notes within a 1-beat pattern. Now we can expand to 2 beats. And for this, I decided to write it down on a sheet of paper. The way I organized this was into 4 columns. So essentially each little box just has the different combinations of the rhythms. So the first one starts with just the quarter note. The second one is just 2 eighth notes. The third one is just the offbeat, and then the fourth note is nothing. And then for beat 2, it's all the combinations. So that gives us a total of 12 combinations of beats. So what I recommend doing is going through all of these combinations. So if we look at the top left, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or just 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. You can count to 4 to put it into some kind of context. You can even change the rhythm. You can put it in 5. You can do whatever you want. But this is sort of the basic idea. And then if we go on, we have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1. Then we have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Then in the next column, we have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and the same one we had before. Then we have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Another thing is that it's important to keep counting or keep subdividing so that way your quarter notes are equally spaced. With all the places of rest, it's easier to rush or drag because you're not feeling the time anymore. It's just like nothing. So to help you keep track of the time, you can be like, or you can count 1 and 2 in, but something just to keep the eighth notes flowing in your head. Again, subdividing, we'll talk about this in a second. Then finally we have 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Now if you notice, this is actually kind of the same thing as the previous one. 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. If I take out my foot and stop counting, we have. Going back to the first one, we have. Out of context, both rhythms sound exactly the same, but the difference is they're displaced. Meaning for the second rhythm, we come in on the and of 2, the second one we come in right on 2, but it's just 3 continuous eighth notes. We're going, which is something we can all do. We've all clapped before, but it's about the perspective and the context that would really gels it together. Then in the bottom category, we have the first one, which is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Again, this is the same thing as the other one, but it's displaced. Then we have 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Then finally we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Which is the same thing as a separate one, but now we're just doing it continuously. We're putting it in a loop. But you see how all these rhythms sort of interconnect and they're all very related. Then finally, we have the category of the rest on beat 1. So we have 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1. Then we have 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and then we have 1, 2, 1, and 2, and 1, and 2, and 1. So we have all these different combinations. And then you can expand this and keep going, do 3-bar phrases, 4-bar phrases. And when you get to 4-bar phrases, a lot of it is actually just putting these things together, putting 2-bar phrases together. So when you unlock the 2-bar phrases, you also unlock the 4-bar phrases. If you go through a system like this and you're going through every single combination, at the end of it, you'll come out a lot rhythmically stronger because there will be no surprises. You have every combination of 8 notes down and internalized. And if you're a guitar player, you've probably heard me say this before, but strumming patterns are really just a combination of 8 notes. So if we get all of our 8 notes down, we can basically beat most strumming patterns. So now it's time to pick up the guitar or whatever instrument you're playing, and let's get to subdividing. So like I was saying before, it's really important to keep track of the rhythms that you're playing. It's really important to keep track of the steady stream of 8 notes so you don't rush or drag. We want to be able to do this on our instrument as well. And again, I recommend starting off simply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play just a C major scale. I'm going to play it in quarter notes, and I'm going to subdivide the whole time with my tongue. Instead of counting, I'm just going to go. So let's hear that. And then we can do that major scale playing 8 notes. We can do any of the rhythms that we talked about before, etc. So now what I'm going to do to put all this into practice, I'm going to improvise using a C major scale. I'm going to stay within this position of the neck so I don't have to think too much about the note choices and all that stuff. And I'm going to subdivide the whole time, and I can only play 8 notes. Let's check this out. easier to keep in time if you know where the time is. It's a lot easier to play eighth notes if you're constantly subdividing the eighth notes and feeling them throughout everything that you're playing. And if you want a really good resource that has basically all the combinations of eighth notes and more rhythms and all that stuff, there's a book by Ted Reed called Syncopation for the Modern Drummer. I like to use that on guitar actually. I actually made a video on that before, but if you want to buy the book, there's a link in the description. And check out this video to hear how I explain how I use it on guitar. But anyway, that's about all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.